So last school year, if we go back 15 months ago, this really was the headlines. District had come off another round of making some cuts, and things didn't look really good. But we were just at the start of a Prop R campaign, and thanks to a lot of people in this room, when we asked people yes or no, we got way more yeses than nos. So thank you, and thank you to all the people in this room who were a part of that. So the community made a decision of which way to go. And so that was a good thing, because we, at least in my mind, certainly chose the better of two paths, okay? And that was really to fund our strategic plan. Now, we talked about the need for 84 cents to fund the strategic plan, but we asked for and we got the 49. And that really is funding primarily our staff development plan, reinvesting in actually having classroom materials, facility maintenance. My goodness, we've done a lot of work over the summer, 2 new HVAC systems, a lot of new parking, and we actually had a little bit of a planning meeting for the ton of work that's going to happen next summer. And then funding for technology. So all 9th through 12th graders now have laptops. Okay? So we've funded quite a bit with Prop R. And that strategic plan really has 3 elements. We've got a student preparation piece, we've got a teacher support piece, and we've got an effective and efficient piece. We've been working a lot in the student preparation piece. We've really broken that down into really 3 areas. Student engagement, we've done a lot of staff development around student engagement. Continuous improvement, we've done a lot of staff development around continuous improvement. And the last is innovation. And we're having conversations about innovative practices that we could bring to the district. But we also kind of asked later on in the year, hey, we got this 4 cents in debt that's expiring. Can we keep funding that? Can we keep that to fund roofs and HVAC? So we've got that for the next 10 years to fund stuff too. But even though during the Prop R campaign, what we heard a lot of was, well, you just waste money. Oh my gosh, you guys waste money. So we asked people, how do we waste money? And we got a lot of stuff back. We got a lot of responses back. And some of those responses were inaccurate. So we pushed back a little bit, and we did a little bit of myth busting, or at least we tried to. So they go over a few of those things that were kind of inaccurate from what we heard from folks. The first was school board members get paid. Not true. Not in Missouri. It does happen in some places, but not in Missouri. We heard that, oh, we've got this expensive district retirement system. We don't have a district retirement system. Our district is part of a statewide retirement system that encompasses almost every school district in Missouri. That retirement system has $37 billion in assets and is over 80% pre-funded. And what we mean by 80% pre-funded is that if folks stop paying into it today, it would fund over 80% of the obligations. Kind of put that in context, Social Security, 0% pre-funded. It's pay as you go, right? Paying Social Security now for somebody drawing out now. So we also heard all these administrators have these cell phones. Well, administrators don't have cell phones provided by the district. We do have a handful of maintenance staff that has cell phones provided by the district. Just a handful of those guys. We heard we should consolidate buildings. So we've been looking at enrollment, and if I look at enrollment, I look at elementary schools in particular. Hegeman is the smallest, with an enrollment of around 300. So the other 9 elementary schools don't have enough space to pick up 300 kids from Hegeman and distribute them among the other 9. So that wouldn't work. Middle schools, probably even worse. There's no way we could close one of the middle schools and consolidate into the other 3. And the high school, neither one of them will hold 3,300 kids. So the only way you consolidate buildings is you build a new one. Well, that really doesn't save you money, does it? Because you have to invest to build a new high school, probably $100 million in building a new high school of a size that could do that. And then you'd probably have to invest pretty significantly to find enough ground within the district to build something that large. So those are some of the myths. Some more of the myths that we heard were that we had too many custodians. So we looked at the data. So we looked at how many square feet do our custodians cover on average? And we compared that to other districts. Our custodians cover more square footage than anybody else that we looked at. Not too many custodians. We heard that salaries were too high. So we're kind of in the midst of a salary study, and we could see when we compared salary schedules to the districts that we lose the most teachers to, that at the beginning of a career and at the end of a career, we were not competitive at all. So it made it harder to attract folks, made it harder to keep folks. Our salary schedule committee made some adjustments to that, which improved that a little bit, but still not where it should be. On terms of the administrator side, what we did is we looked at data within the county, and all of our administrative positions are in the bottom 35% of administrators within their category. So if I take a look at transportation director, he's going to be in the bottom 35%. If I take a look at an assistant superintendent, they're going to be in the bottom 35%. Same with principals. And in some job categories, it's even they're lower than that. So the last thing we kind of heard a lot about is you had too many administrators. So again, we turned to the data. We took a look. So we referenced state minimum requirements. State minimum requirements for building administrators is based on the number of kids in the building. So using those numbers, if we go through all of the buildings, we're 2.5 principals short of meeting the state minimum standard. We also looked at assistant superintendents. Assistant superintendent count is based on the number of teachers, number of certificated staff, and for assistant superintendents, we're short 2 assistant superintendents to meet state standard. So we just kind of looked at some myths and kind of tried to push back on that. So that one of the challenges is that when folks have these kind of interesting perceptions, it's hard to, sometimes data doesn't really push it for folks. So really kind of what we've asked folks to do around some of these misperceptions is what a lot of our kids and some of our teachers and some of our administrators would kind of like, and that's the notion from Yoda of folks need to unlearn what they have learned. What you think is not always right. So you got to unlearn and relearn. And unlearning stuff can be a challenge. It can be a challenge to what you have a perception about in your head. That moves us to this year. So we're off and running. What are we, 12 days in, give or take? 13, 14 days off and running. But let's go back to that savings thing. Because we got all these ideas where people thought, well, that's not quite right. What you think is not quite right. But we got some great ideas from folks too. So it wasn't all just kind of interesting stuff. It was some really good ideas. And we've taken off on some of those and started to utilize those. So the first has been Peach Jar. So Peach Jar allows us to send a whole bunch of stuff electronically that we used to copy and you would get in a paper folder. And then you'd probably get those same papers next week and then the same papers the week after that. So in an effort to reduce paper, we've moved to Peach Jar. Sorry for the volume on the glugs. Second, we've taken a look at our utilities and we put in place a utility incentive for the buildings to reduce utility usage. And so far what we've seen is that our utility bills are down, mostly on the gas side, and that's primarily because January, February, and March were a lot warmer than the prior year. But overall, kilowatt hour usage is down about 5% across the district. Some buildings that we've got double-digit reductions in what they're doing. And we know that the new HVAC systems we put in this summer will save some funds on electrical costs there as well. And we've got more of those coming into the future. So we also take a look at personnel. People thought, hey, you need to reduce people, but we're a pretty lean organization already. I mentioned the administrators, the shortage there. We know we've got high class sizes across the district really. But what we are doing is that anytime anybody leaves, we're really asking, do we keep that position? Do we restructure it? Can we realign it? How can we look at every position to make us more efficient? So we got the personnel piece. We got the rental piece. People told us, we need to take a look at our rental structure to try to bring in some more revenue that way. So we've actually got a group that's been working on that, did a little bit of work on the summer. Hopefully we'll be finished late this semester, early next semester, and comparing our rental structure to other districts and how we can leverage some of our facilities that people would like to get into a little bit more to create some revenue. Folks told us we could save money by eliminating block scheduling. This is one that has attracted a lot of attention. The reality is, from the report that we got 2 weeks ago, you can definitely save money by eliminating block scheduling. The question is, will we, should we, what that's going to look like. So we've got a group that's looking at that. They're actually going to have their first meeting tomorrow, and there's a community meeting tomorrow night at Oakville High School on block scheduling. And those will be held a few more throughout the fall. But the biggest number really is that a couple weeks ago, we presented preliminary information to the Board of Education on refinancing some outstanding debt. And we anticipate that we would recommend next week and that the board would act to refinance some outstanding debt to lower the interest rates and keep the term of the debt the same, but save about $500,000 over 5 years. So we're looking at doing that probably next week is when that would occur. So that's some significant savings there. So new this year is a website, new website this year. It's a new website because the folks who did our old website, the company was phasing out, so we had to get a new one. So it's a little bit, looks a little bit different. You got my shiny head on there. We can remove that at any time, John. But from that website, we've got a new piece that just launched last week called Let's Talk. We had an Ask the District piece to our website, and folks would send in a question. That question would go to one person. Then that one person would, try to search out and find the answer and reply back. Now we've got the Let's Talk piece. So if you have a question about transportation, you click on transportation. That question goes directly to our transportation department. So here you click on a button, you fill out a little form, it goes directly to the person who's responsible for that area. And we've kind of got a generic area too. So today we got roughly a dozen or so questions on Let's Talk. That's just what it's called, Let's Talk. Also on our website, we've got a whole new section devoted to district finances, a lot of district financial information, old information, a lot of old budgets, a lot of old audits, a lot of old finance stuff, along with current year stuff. So this is kind of your one-stop shop for district finances. You click on any of these buttons and more things open up. Also on our website that's kind of new and interesting is a community dashboard. This is on our key performance indicators within our strategic plan. So 2 of them say 0. That's because when I grabbed this off of our website a while back, we did not have data for those 2 items yet. So these are the 6 key indicators, and we can take a real quick snapshot of how we're doing relative to those. But you can click on any one of those boxes and the data expands around that particular piece. And then even in there, you can kind of click around a little bit and play around. So enrollment, as of last week, end of the month, start of the month, we're just under 10,300. Looking at historical data and using what's called a cohort survival projection, we would have anticipated the enrollment to be a little bit lower. Now, our numbers and the projection numbers that we use from year to year, we don't make that a hard number until the end of the month. So we could see some changes, and surprisingly, it's kind of a strange deal where even though we've been in school for a while, there's a whole set of people that don't show up until this week. Some people just don't show up until after Labor Day. So those numbers will change a little bit. So by grade level, you can kind of see about where we are, but on average, about 755 kids in a particular grade level. But if we look at individual schools, here we've got 3 of our elementary schools kind of on the more on the northern end of the district. You can see what their enrollment is over the last 10 years, where that's trending. The blue line is free and reduced lunch status within that school. The yellow line, or green line, that's a little bit more faint, this one here, is ELL population or percentage of ELL within any given building. What I added this time is these little numbers above it. People saw this these graphs a year ago. The number at the top is new, and that is the number of languages our kids speak in that building. So we got a lot of languages in Beer Bomb. Last year we had a kindergarten class with 9 languages just in that one classroom. So we've got a lot of diversity in the district. So here's kind of our kind of middle of the district, some of those elementary schools. You can see the trends there and kind of what they look like. You can see the south end of the district and kind of what that's looking like, the 3 schools down there. So kind of got the 3 schools at the north, the 4 elementaries more in the middle, and then the 3 schools down here on the southern end of the district. Middle schools, we can see what those are, but you can see pretty clearly that enrollment overall in middle schools has kind of been declining over the last 10 years. And then in the high schools, you can see what's happening with enrollment there. Again, we've seen a decline over time, but there are a lot of languages spoken in this building by our kids. So we are a very diverse district, perhaps more so than some folks would come to realize. So that's kind of the district a little bit in a nutshell. And what we're doing this year is to kind of ask folks, you know, I showed you at the beginning we had the yes or no with Prop R. So now we've got some decisions now that we're moving down the yes path. So we're going to ask folks and engage folks on a number of issues throughout the year. Coming up before too long is we're going to ask folks about calendar. We're going to present you with 3 calendar scenarios, and we're going to ask you what you like and don't like about each one. We're not asking you to vote on the calendar. We're asking you what you like and don't like about each one. And then what's going to happen is Mike here is going to make comments about each of those calendars. Then we're going to turn around and we're going to send Mike's comments after we curate them to make sure that all of his comments are on the topic and none of them are vulgar. And then we're going to send them back to you. And then you're going to get to see the comments that people across the community made around these calendars. And you're going to be given roughly 20 stars. And you're going to see 8 or 10 comments. And you can put up to 5 stars on a comment. And that way we can begin to see what pieces really resonate. And our calendar committee is going to use that to take your input on the scenarios to then begin to build the calendars. So what you're going to see are just scenarios. And 2 of them are kind of alike, but one of them is very different. And that is an after Labor Day start. We hear from people about, we should start after Labor Day. Well, now you're going to get to see a calendar of what an after Labor Day start looks like. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't like it. Okay? Block scheduling. We're asking a committee to take a look at block scheduling. They're meeting tomorrow night. Part of their charge is to develop model schedules for people to give feedback on. So they'll be doing that work. Redistricting. So We've got elementary schools that are overcrowded. Classrooms are overcrowded. We've got elementary schools where we have some space. We've got some interesting alignment of students in that regard. So we're taking a look at where kids live, what our boundaries are, and we've got that group meeting. That group will actually form later this week. We'll get notify those folks of who's going to be on that committee, and then they'll start work. That work will be throughout kind of the fall and winter. And then in the spring, that group will present scenarios of redistricting for you to take a look at and then comment on, and then kind of keep tweaking and running scenarios until we get down to something that we can act upon probably in the March to April range. And the last thing is going to be facilities. We're going to engage people on facilities. That tool that we're going to use for the calendar with the starring piece, we're going to use that same thing for facilities. We're going to ask you what needs work in each of your buildings, and then you'll be able to star that, and that will probably start second semester. So we're going to be engaging folks on a number of areas to help us determine which way we're headed. And it's really not a yes or no. It's not a this way or that way. It's a this way or this way or that way or that way or that way. Or perhaps it's this way and this way and this way and this way. So it's not always two dichotomous choices. It's that we could take directions in both ways, because some kids could go this path and some kids could go that path. All right? So let's kind of pause a little bit and let's find out what you know about the world. Okay? So here's where you're going to need your phones. Administrators, you're not participating. And the reason that you're not participating, and actually probably not everybody will be able to participate, is that we're limited to 40 responses. So if you're one of the first 40 in, good for you. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions. So from this point on, all you're going to do is text your answer A, B, or C back to that same number. Okay? But when I ask you that question, we're going to see relative responses up here and where people think they are. Okay? So, first question. Across the world, what percentage of 1-year-olds do you think are vaccinated for measles? Across the planet, what percentage of 1-year-olds do you think are vaccinated for measles? So you can see that moving as you answer and where our responses are. So it's changing every time somebody enters in something. Seem to have stabilized. Maybe not. Still moving along. Looks like we've settled in. All right, so 90% think 20%. Okay, that's a lot of you. Okay, next question. Now, the next question is going to have a little bit of pre-information. If I can click. Okay. So, how many children will there be on the planet in the year 2100? Now, here's a really weird caveat that some of you will like. In this demography, children are up to 50 years old. Okay? So that's a big range, right? So children are 0 to 50. But let's give you a little background information. So in the year 1950, there were 1 billion children on the planet. 1 billion 0 to 50-year-olds. By the year 2000, that had climbed to 2 billion. So what will it be in the year 2100? Will it climb to 4? Will it climb to 3? Or will it stabilize at 2? A, B, or C? What's going to happen to the population of children on the planet over the next 84 years? So let's just quick show of hands. 4 billion. 4 billion. 3 billion. 2 billion. Okay. So I'm assuming the last question is going to have the same issue. Across the planet, if you're a male, 25 years or older, you've on average gone to school for 8 years. That's across the world. What's that number for women of the same age group? Is it 3, 5, or 7? So where are my threes? Many people think it's 3. 5? 7. Okay. So let's go back to the first question. If you ask people across the planet on the vaccinated 1-year-olds, if you're from Sweden, man, a lot of them say 20%, but even more of you did. U.S. is a little bit more even split. The answer is 80. 80% of the world's children are vaccinated against the measles. 1-year-olds. What about the number of kids on the planet? Well, if you ask the Swedes, they're kind of split between 3 and 4 billion. U.S., man, we just know it's going to be 4. And if you just gather a group of chimpanzees and, put down some things with numbers on them, it's just a random selection, so they're going to be about a third on each one. And they're more right than anybody else because it's 2 billion. It's going to hold steady at 2 billion. So that seems kind of weird, right? So we get these preconceived notions. 90% of you thought 20% of the 1-year-olds are vaccinated. More of you thought the population would grow to 4 and 3 billion than to 2 billion. Well, guess what? Vaccination programs work. The Gates Foundation and others like them pour a ton of money into vaccinating kids in developing countries, and it works, does very well. But we've got this notion, perhaps, that kids aren't vaccinated across the world. And that's a notion that we've just kept. And we've reiterated all of these years, but it's really not quite accurate. The same way with the number of kids growing. We think, well, the graph, it's just got to keep going up, right? It's just got to keep going up because we hear about overpopulation and all this stuff. But what we find when we dig into the data is that the child per woman number is going down, and it's stabilizing. And it's going down and stabilizing because women across the planet are becoming more educated and their income is higher. Leads us to the third one, and that is 7 years. Girls go to school on average 7 years. They have incredible access to primary school across the world, but they absolutely fight for access to secondary education because in a lot of countries at 14 a girl is married off or she's going into some sort of servitude, not a happy situation. So if you were taking my quiz, the answer was C every time. So if you find this interesting or you just don't believe it, I would encourage you to check out Gapminder. They do a lot of work with data, and then specifically they have a project they're working on called the Ignorance Project in fighting preconceived notions around the planet. But the gentleman here in the slide, his name is Hans Rosling. He's a professor, and they've put together some of the best data on the planet, pulled it all together, and put it in these amazing charts and graphs, and you can watch them move over time, or you can highlight a particular country. So the population stuff, you can just watch child per woman number go down as income goes up. And then the population will stabilize. So we've got these preconceived notions about the world, and people had these myths about the district. What about school? What are our notions about school and what school is? Well, usually our notions about something are defined by our experiences. And how we experience something that's kind of what we would expect over and over again, right? We're defined by our experiences. So, what do you think about when you think of school? What does that look like? Is it Desks and chairs in rows with a chalkboard in the front. Then there's like over 40 chairs in this classroom. Is your perception of school what you think about just drill and kill worksheets? If you're of a certain age, I bet it is. Or is your perception of school this happy place where everybody raises their hand when a teacher asks a question? Now, the teacher says if you know the answer, raise your right hand, and if you don't know the answer, raise your left hand. That way, everybody's got their hands up. Just make sure if you're called on, you raise the hand you meant to, right? Maybe your recollection of school is, man, I was just bored out of my gourd because all my teacher did was lecture all day long, and that and between drill and kill worksheets on punctuation and capitalization, I was just worn out. Maybe that's your perception of school. Maybe you're a little older and it was in black and white. You know, the desks are still there, bored kids are still there, hairstyles are a little different, clothing styles are a little bit different, but it's all still there. Maybe your perception of school is perhaps a little bit like counting, right? Because you were counting to see, you know, who, when, what paragraph you were going to have to read. So you weren't paying attention to what anybody else was reading. You're just trying to look ahead to what you're going to have to read. Maybe that's what you think of school. You remember about school. Or maybe you think of school with not necessarily desks and chairs, but more modular furniture. Think about kids with devices where they can look up almost any piece of factual information, where kids are working with robots. Maybe that's your perception of school. Maybe that's what you remember about school, right? But has school really changed? Has it really changed? Now, if you will go to do a search for a guy named Jamie Vollmer, he's got a website, and he's got a list of things that have been added to school over time. All the things that have been added, such as big focus on STEM education after Sputnik. All the drug education and sex education and driver's ed, all the things that have been added, cyber security education, all the things that have been added over time to what school is, yet we've not changed the length of the day, right? So has school really changed? Well, classrooms are really mostly the same. Desks, chairs, not all, but mostly across the country, classrooms are the same. We're still on an agrarian calendar. Still going 175 to 180 days a year across the country. Now, some people have begun to go, well, if we're going to go 175 to 180 days, does it really matter in the year when they are? And begin to shift when those days are. We follow grade levels that date back to the industrial age, right? Because school as we know it today dates back to the industrial age. Because we went from a one-room schoolhouses to big schools where we had to progress kids along. And we progressed them along based on their age, not their ability. So we put a group of 5-year-olds together, and then we put a group of 6-year-olds, and then we put a group of 7-year-olds. However, if you look at our rules on how old a kid has to be before they start kindergarten, if you look at the oldest kid and the youngest kid in any given class, that's a pretty good spread. So that spread, not a big difference when you're in your 40s or 50s, maybe even your 30s. But that big spread is a huge difference when you're 5, 6, and 7-year-old, because that's a huge percentage of a kid's life. Yet, we stick them all together based on age rather than their ability. And the choice or tracks that we stick kids in are pretty much unchanged. We're not, we used to call them tracks, then we got out calling them tracks, and then we kind of call them pathways, but It's essentially the same. We've had college prep, a vocational, or then kind of everybody else. If you weren't in one of those others, then you were kind of in the catch-all group. So schools really are much the same as they are 100 years ago. So I asked, what about school? And I said that we're defined by our experiences. So if you're at home and something breaks in your house and you think you're going to try to fix it by yourself rather than calling a repairman, and you don't know how to do it, what do? Go to YouTube, probably. Go to Lowe's how-to or Home Depot how-to, right? And there's going to be a video. So if I need to know how to do something, more than likely I can find it on the internet, right? So all learning doesn't have to look alike. Because I bet if you watch a video of how to do something and then you go to do it, it's stuck. You've got it. You're going to learn it. So fairly often I will wear a bow tie. So how you learn to tie a bow tie? Well, you watch videos on the internet until you figure it out, right? It's just like tying your shoe. But when you're learning it, you're like, there's no way this is like tying my shoe. After you've tied one for a while, it's exactly like tying your shoe. But you can learn it on the internet. So if all learning doesn't have to look the same, could school be different for kids? Could school look different for one kid than another kid? Is that possible? Well, come back to that in a little bit. We'll take a little bit of a sidetrack and talk about elephants. So back in the spring, I had come across an article called, it was entitled, 9 Elephants in the Classroom That Should Unsettle Us, written by Will Richardson. I just kind of randomly came across it, just kind of glimpsed at it, and it was kind of like, wow, he's kind of calling us out on a lot of these things. And since then, I've kind of used the stuff from that in a couple of talks I've given. So there are 9 elephants. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there are a few I do want to hit. One, kids just aren't going to remember most of what they learn in school because they don't learn it. They remember it for a test and move on, right? How many of you in here remember the steps to meiosis and mitosis that you would have had in a basic biology class? Okay? Pretty slim, right? Okay? So there's some data behind this. So statistically, 25% of you don't know that the earth revolves around the sun. Half of you don't know that antibiotics won't cure a virus. And just under half of our high school graduates in the room don't know that the First Amendment to the Constitution guarantees the freedom of the press. Yet don't you think all of those were taught in school? They weren't learned. They didn't stick. They don't stick. I kind of fell out when I saw this data. I'm like, well, I need to use that. So that's one thing. Kids really don't remember what they learn in school. 2, kind of goes to some of those pictures. Kids are bored and disengaged in school. Across the country, kids are generally bored and disengaged. When we talk to folks that do walkthroughs around the country, shadow kids, they will see this over and over again. Now, I'm not saying that kids are bored and disengaged in every classroom at every given minute of the day. But as a general rule, across the country, what we find is that kids are bored and disengaged. So if I go back to the strategic plan, student preparation piece, student engagement is one of our key elements, because we know that we've got to engage learners. So this looks weird, right? So think about school. Think about what we do or what you know about school. So at a certain time, we have this class. And then 90 minutes or 50 minutes or 45 minutes or wherever you go to school, you're going to move to this totally and completely different subject. And then a little while later, after whatever time period, you're going to move to the next one. And so on and so on and so on. And tomorrow when you come back, you're going to come back to the start. You're going to do that all over again. We teach in discrete subjects in discrete blocks of time, rather than integrating subjects and making time flexible. So, math and science are typically pretty interrelated. How can we integrate those two subject areas into relevant and meaningful coursework? Language arts bleeds over, writing bleeds over to almost any field. If I'm a kid that's excited about electronics, why can't I do my writing around electronics and what I'm interested in? Because if I'm interested in it, I'm probably more apt to do quality work around it rather than something that I really don't care about. Social studies, culture, language arts. We had a lot of things that bleed together, that could integrate. Yet our system is designed to teach in discrete subjects and blocks of time. Now, I will say, we do have some teachers that are playing around with combining classes and integrating subjects. So we like to see that and that relevance. So here's a big one. It's all about the GPA. You're more interested in grades than learning. Maybe that's why we don't remember what we learn in school. We remember for a test so that we can make a good grade and we can move on. So, you think about that body measurement triad of the three numbers, whatever they are, 30-something, 20-something, 30-something, whatever that is. So we got the academic triad of ACT score, GPA, and class rank, right? So, I'm a 34 ACT with a 4.0 GPA, and I'm ranked 2 in my class. And that's important. Why? The all-important dollar. We've got it ingrained in ourselves that we've got to get these things so I can get into college, so I can get a good scholarship, so I can go on to do the next thing and the next thing. So whether or not we as educators like it, the reality is parents and kids care more about the grades than what they're actually learning. Probably as a matter of fact, we reinforce that to a large extent. And we don't always assess what's really relevant, right? We move kids along in discrete subjects in discrete amounts of time. So what do we assess? Discrete bits of knowledge, especially on state tests that we don't get the results back for 6 months on. But one of the reasons we do that is it's kind of hard to assess stuff that kind of really matters and is relevant. This stuff is a whole lot harder to assess than whether or not a kid knows the steps of meiosis or mitosis or can manipulate the quadratic equation or knows why the American Revolution started. They call these 21st century skills. But I think most of us know these have been around for a long time, have been necessary for a long time. But if we've seen the job market change, these are becoming ever more important. Yet, we're still struggling with how to assess them. And it all goes to time and standards. We have held the school calendar and the amount of time constant for nearly 100 years, maybe more, yet we have continued to pile more and more into it. So on the bottom we got the number of days. Across the country it's going to be 175 to 180. Here it's 174, which is most districts in Missouri. The top are our standards. So this middle one, That's the on-pace kid who will get to all the standards right on the last day of school, right? Right as the bell's ringing on the last day. We got all the standards. The reality is, for some kids, it takes longer than that. They won't get to that standard in that amount of time. For other kids, they're going to get to that standard well ahead of that time. So for a time period, you've got a student who's bored, perhaps, and disengaged. Maybe then they become a little mischievous, maybe make some bad choices. Or you got the student here who's struggling, doesn't really grasp what's going on in classroom. So maybe they're a little restless and a little mischievous. But school is designed for only that kid, pretty much, the way we have it now. And some people will call this zone in here and this zone in here the dropout zone, because those are kids who are more apt to drop out. Kids who are bright as well as kids who are struggling. Okay? So, what if? Thinking about all of that, what if? What if we could move kids by ability rather than age? What if it wasn't a factory industrialized model? What if we could personalize pathways for kids instead of having a one-size-fits-most system? I mean, that's really what we have now. Our system doesn't fit all kids. What if? Ask them what if. What if we could award high school credit based on knowledge rather than seat time? What if you showed us you know something, we could give you credit and move on in high school? What if we could do that? What if kids could graduate with an associate's degree? Not just take a bunch of dual credit classes, not just take a bunch of AP classes, but actually walk out of high school with an associate's degree and a high school diploma. What if? What if? What if, rather than us taking a set curriculum and trying to adapt everything to meet that set curriculum, what if we could adapt that curriculum based on a student's strengths and weaknesses? What if we could take that kid who's got a proclivity for photography or science or language and build a curriculum to pull out that student's strengths while still hitting the essential elements of any particular subject, but do it in a context that's relevant for them? What if so many kids just surviving through school, they could actually thrive? What if we could design a system where the kid who reaches a standard early can keep going, and the kid who's struggling and is not going to meet the standard, how can we redesign the system for them? What if student choice was expanded instead of a kind of a college prep track, a vocational track, and everybody else? You know, there used to be like 2 choices of M&M, right? Plain or peanuts. But now there's like a whole lot more. I mean, you get M&Ms in different sizes. I mean, you get flavors of M&Ms that people even dreamed of. Spaghetti sauce is the same way, right? Snickers, you know, there used to be like 1 Snickers. Now how many kinds of Snickers are there? Same with Reese's. So what if we could expand student choice within a day? What if we could do all of that and more, yet still offer a traditional path to our kids? Because what we do know is that a traditional path for some kids works. That's a best fit for them. But it's not the best fit for all kids. So we're not talking about destroying a traditional path to education. We're talking about creating other paths. Others are doing it. Moving kids by ability rather than age. That's happening in Pattonville. Kids graduating high school with an associate's degree It's happening in the Houston area. It's happening in the Phoenix area. It's happening in the Chicago area. It's happening in Jefferson County. And St. Louis Public just launched a group of kids who will finish high school with an associate's degree. So if they're doing it, why not us? Why can't we do that? Shouldn't our kids have similar opportunities? Doesn't mean they have to take it, but shouldn't we at least be able to offer it? Shouldn't we be able to offer it? So it's really about going back to kind of what we talked about earlier and our notion of what school is. Can we reimagine what school looks like? Can we reimagine what school looks like? So, new polls out over the last week or so. Everybody wants school to be better. Education Next poll, you had a Gallup poll. It wasn't done by Gallup this year, it's still done by PDK, but a different firm did it. Everybody wants school to be better, just nobody wants it to be different. Nobody wants school to be different. So why is that? Why don't you want school to be different? Well, for two reasons. The first is tradition. Over 200 million people have gone to school in a certain way. They expect everybody else to do it the same way. We think of school more as a rite of passage than an experience for kids. The second is physics. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. An object in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. In other words, objects and organizations just keep doing what they're doing unless acted upon by an outside force. So, think Blockbuster. Anybody driven by a Blockbuster lately? Anybody used to drive by a Blockbuster a lot? Yeah. What happened? They got replaced. Remember when you actually had to go somewhere and like walk into a store and like pick out a video and then like take it home? You actually had to rewind it, right? And then you had to take it back within 24 hours at first, right? Now you can get them delivered to your door, you get them streamed over the deal. But more of those people at Blockbuster, that's just the way we've always done it. We just always let people come in, grab their videos, go back, right? Remember when everybody smoked? Not only did everybody smoke, people smoked on airplanes. Won't you imagine that today? You're sitting on an airplane, and the person next to you actually lights a fire to light something else that is going to smolder. But we changed. But we've changed. And in changing, it's not hard to accept the new. It's hard to let go of the old. It's hard to break old habits. That's that whole inertia thing. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. It's hard to let go of the old. So let's think about changing the questions. Let's ask what if. Let's think about changing the questions. So instead of focusing on just how to raise student achievement, maybe we ought to think about how to get kids excited about learning, not just remembering for a test. Make it relevant. Instead of focusing on the MAP test, where we get the results 6 months later, maybe we should think of making kids independent learners, because they are now. All these young folks up here are sitting there with their phones. If they want to know something, they can look it up. So what if we change their conversation to making kids successful in a community, country, and beyond? What if, instead of asking, how do I get through chapter 15 in 175 days, which means just over 10 days per chapter, which breaks down into this, instead of just covering everything, How can I make it relevant and meaningful? How do we make it relevant and meaningful? We need to rethink that the aim of school is not to do well in school, it's to do well in life. So, how many folks do you know with a 4.0 GPA, a 34 ACT score, and a number 2 in their class that are not successful in life? They were really good at school, but after they got out of school, they struggled because they were good at that one thing. So as you think about a kid for a minute, just think about a kid who's got perfect attendance this school year. If we take that 12 months, that student will be in our care roughly 12% of that year. I think the other 88% is important too, but we concentrate a lot on the 12. So really, when we think about change, if I go back to the pieces of the strategic plan around student preparation, student engagement, continuous improvement, and innovation, what we're talking about is how do we do what we already do better? That's continuous improvement. How do we do what we already do better? And 2, innovation. How can we create a better and different future for our students? How can we do that? So, student engagement, continuous improvement, and innovation are driving everything that we're talking about. Change doesn't mean we throw everything out as we talk about making some changes. It's, are there things that we should stop doing? Such as sending tons of paper home all the time when we can do that electronically. Are there things that we should keep doing? And are things that we need to do differently? That's continuous improvement. How do we do those things? So, if we're stuck in our comfort zone based on tradition or physics, how do we get to where the magic happens? Often over there and we're here. So we need an outside force to get us moving. And if that outside force doesn't happen soon, when? If not now, when? When will it happen? If not now. So really, do we go this way, or this way, or this way, or this way? Or do we go this way, and this way, and this way, and this way? Because we've got a lot of kids, that path may work for 12% of them, and this path may work for 27%. Why can't we offer both, as well as this path over here? It's really our decision. We're going to be engaging folks on a number of things. How can we become better? How can we become better? So, a lot of people fear change because they like the status quo. So, as we embark on these conversations, I would ask that you think about not change as something to fear, but change as a possibility and a chance to do something amazing. We serve just under 10,300 kids. Can we make the future brighter for them? I think we can. We don't have to throw out the traditional path, but should we not create some other opportunities for kids that kids in other places have? I think the kids in Melville deserve those opportunities, and I hope that you will engage with us over the coming weeks to be a part of that conversation through a multitude of outlets. So thank you very much for coming tonight. I appreciate you coming out. Thanks again for Prop R, and I hope you have a safe trip home. Thanks.